Happy Wednesday, my winners and goal getters. Welcome back to the Getting the Win Show. I am your host, Mellissa T, the procrastination bully. And if this is your first time, welcome. You are in season 3 and we are in the thick of it. So thank you so much for tuning in. This week I'm coming back to teach. You guys always know whenever you come to the Getting the Win Show, come prepared to take notes, right? So today I'm teaching, and this time I'm actually going to highlight something that you might be missing if you're a recovering procrastinator and you're still facing frustration as it relates to getting to work on your luxury item, like moving forward, moving the needle on your luxury item. You may be missing one of these two things. So I'm going to break both of them down because the point is to move forward, you'll need to do both approaches. You're going to need both in order to make the progress because science, okay? That was one of the things I promised from back in season 1. Remember, I did say like the further into the series we got, I was going to get more scientific on you. For today's episode, I'm going to highlight both approaches to beating procrastination. And based on your experience, you may be missing one of them. So this episode is intended to fill that gap for you. Okay, so I'll break this down in the simplest way possible. But approach number 1, you have to focus on the distractions you want to get rid of, right? But approach number 2 is focusing on the things we want to do, the positive behaviors we want to do to move forward. Now, if you're like most people, you've probably been focusing on one or the other. And perhaps that might be your point of frustration. So today I'm going to break down each of those approaches, what's necessary in both, and why the two of them work together, why it's important that you do both in order to move forward and move the needle and get that thing done, whatever that is that you're procrastinating on. So without further ado, I'm going to get into it. But first, let me remind you, if you haven't yet, be sure to click that like button, share this video, and subscribe. Subscribe to the channel. Shout out to all the folks that have so far, and if you're interested in joining the Goal Getter community, just shoot me an email at info@melissathomas.co with Telegram in the subject line, and we'll get you in there. All right, so getting into part 1 in terms of getting rid of the habits you want to break, okay? In terms of procrastinating, perhaps your situation is distractions, which for most of us, when it comes to procrastination, that's what it comes down to, is distractions. We're yielding to distractions. So rule number 1 is to make the distractions difficult. Make the distractions difficult. So we're talking not only in terms of mental work. You've seen some of the episodes where I've gone very heavily into the mental health side of things, the behavior modification side of things. In this case, also employ the practical. So if your phone is your biggest distraction, I'm gonna show you mine. It ain't far, right? We usually keep these things pretty close to us. If your phone is your biggest distraction, DND is your friend, okay? Do not disturb is your friend. Even if only for a specific block of time in your day. You may be the type of person that is the go-to person on your job or in your business. So you can't afford to fully keep your phone on do not disturb all day. Maybe you don't have that luxury, but you can do it for a specific block of time. You can do it for a specific block of time. And I love how Mel Robbins puts it. She was talking about specifically working on your goals. She said, if you're saying you don't have time to work on your goals, BS. She actually spelled it out. But she says BS. You've got 10 minutes. So even if you're in that situation where you are the go-to person, everybody calls you, you can block out 10 minutes where nobody is allowed to disturb you. So you can do something like that and keep the phone by you if you prefer to do that. Cal Newport, who is one of the foremost voices in productivity and simplicity, he's big on minimalism. And he calls his approach the phone in the foyer approach, meaning keeping your phone in a separate room, like away from you. And that way you're less inclined to succumb to the distractions. Or if you're going to have your phone close at hand, he was saying perhaps remove some of the apps off your phone. You know what I mean? That way you're not tempted to go on the apps even when you do have to look on your phone for a relevant text message. You're not also then going to see an icon for, a social media platform or even YouTube or something like that that you may be tempted to click on and end up scrolling, end up down a rabbit hole. So yeah, any one of those three methods as it relates to the phone can be your thing. If your Achilles heel is streaming or, watching stuff, use that method for if you're watching on a separate device like a tablet, move the tablet. Or if it's a room where you have your TV, especially if you have a smart TV, good grief. Because a smart TV is essentially an oversized one of these without the ability to make phone calls. So work in a room that doesn't have that. And I'll be honest with y'all, just from a practical standpoint, that helped me. Like I'm someone who's a writer by passion. So especially fiction. So I love watching series. Like it is very easy for me to binge. But for the last about 3 years or so, I want to say, none of the rooms that I've been in have TVs in them. None of them. None of them. Because I realized I had to stop doing that. I would waste hours upon hours binging. And if you're anybody that has like the basic cable or regular cable, whatever, Ion Television was my Achilles heel because they ran all of the syndicated series that I love. I'm a big mystery person, so I would sit there binging on Law and Order, and then 2 hours later, Law and Order SVU. 2 hours later, Criminal Minds. 2 hours later, you know what I mean? Insert mystery series here, and I would watch it and would squander days. Can't afford to do that, right? Like life is too short. So if it's a situation where you have to either be in a room away from the television, or if you're able to, take the television down. You know what I'm saying? But either way, make the distraction difficult. If your distraction is food, make the distraction difficult. One, if the food is not healthy for you, it's not serving you, don't stop buying it. Like literally stop buying it and replace it with something that will serve you, something that you enjoy eating, but will be healthier for you. So for those of you who tuned in for episode 40, like the end of season 2, where I mentioned my health journey, I said I went whole food plant-based. I was a huge sugar addict before that. When I went whole food plant-based, the replacement was fruit because that was the only source of sugar, period. That's the only source of sugar I was allowed to eat. I had to go SOS free, sugar, oil, and salt. So I removed the distraction, made the distractions difficult, got that stuff out the house, fresh produce, and that was the substitution. And this is the crux of this entire video. It's not enough to simply remove the things that don't serve you. You have to also replace them. That is how the brain works. This is the science. So for now, I'm still in part 1. We're still in the removing the stuff that doesn't serve you. If it's food, no longer purchase those things. Make sure that stuff is not in the house and readily accessible to you, or apartment, wherever you at, or RV. Some of y'all fancy like that. Shout out to my RV folks. Y'all know who y'all are. But yeah, make sure you're removing those things that don't serve you and replacing them with the foods that do. And make sure to employ, if you haven't already, employ taking walks. Because the urge is going to come. The human body is adaptive, and it's big on habit. It's big on expectation and anticipation. So one of the things you'll notice, and this leads into my next tip as it relates to removing stuff that doesn't serve you. One of the things you'll notice when you want to do that thing that distracts you, when you're tempted to do that thing that distracts you, is you'll actually feel an uptick in discomfort. And I recently learned this. Shout out to Cal Newport for sharing the science. When it comes to short term gratification, the behaviors that cause us to give in to the distraction, that's because dopamine is involved, of course. But because there's such a big dopamine release that is involved in the distraction, you'll also notice an uptick in the discomfort right before you partake in the distraction. Think about every time you've ever given in. If you're in the middle of something, but you really feel like watching something for a few minutes, you know what I mean? You'll be in the middle of your work, whether that's work related or like a project that you're working on, your luxury item. If you ever notice, right before you give in to the distraction, you'll sense a certain increase in discomfort or unsteadiness right before you give in. That's because when it comes to short term gratification, most of these things that we use as distractions have been marketed to us as solutions or a sense of relief. So, food, think about food marketing. Most of food marketing is marketed to us as a solution for something, right? We feel hungry, it's time to eat something. But if you notice, food marketing isn't just to satisfy your hunger, it's usually satisfying your hunger and also some kind of emotional relief. Who remembers the Snickers commercials, right? You're not you when you're hungry, right? They always say that. So it's not enough to just talk about the fact that you're hungry. They point out the fact that you're emotionally different when you're hungry. So not only is it satisfying your hunger, they say, it's also satisfying an emotional need, right? It's solving an emotional issue. You're hangry. So all of these distractions, think about them: food, your phone, whether that's social media or, streaming, your TV, if it's streaming with that, video games, that also involves a TV and streaming, right? These things are marketed as solutions. So because of that, your body will actually give you a distress signal right before you give in to the distraction. And because the dopamine hit is so strong, that's what you're going to gravitate to each time. So we're still in part one. Make the distraction difficult. The harder it is to do that distractive thing, the less likely you are to do it. So if you replace the bad food with healthier food options in your house, when you open your pantry, you only have the good food options to eat. So now there's less of the bad stuff. And then what I was getting into is walking. That was the other thing I was about to mention as it relates to making the distraction, the bad food, or even eating, period, a little more difficult. If you're anything like me, because this is something I used to struggle with, I used to use food as a form of procrastination. I used to stop what I was doing just to go eat, simply because I didn't feel like doing that thing right then. I used to pause and go eat. But here's the thing: do you know how much time we even spend eating? Just the time it takes to prepare the food, whatever that is, whether it's prepackaged or you're cooking or you're heating up leftovers. Think about the window of time it takes for us to eat. There's the prep time, there's the eating, and then there's the cleanup. So there's actually a wider window than we might think when we're using food as a tool for procrastination. So walking is a way of making the distraction more difficult. One, it's a calorie negative option, and you still get the gratification of pausing. And there are times when pausing is more productive for you. Any productivity tips that you see or watch, they'll likely talk about the importance of taking breaks. So yeah, taking the walk is a win-win. One, it's calorie negative. You actually burn calories when you're walking. And two, it's actually more conducive for brain function. Walking allows your mind to breathe a little while. You're giving yourself a change of scenery, and it allows your mind time to breathe, even as briefly as 30 minutes. even as briefly as 10. Remember, you can always squeeze 10 minutes into your schedule, right? So even as brief as a 10-minute walk can make all the difference in the world. It can refresh your mind and it gets you away from the food for a bit. One of the tips that a dietitian and nutrition coach helps his clients with as they lose the weight is taking that walk as a calorie negative option and use that time to actually go over why you want to eat the food. Because if you're living in a Western nation like ours, industrialized, this isn't true for everybody, but industrialized countries like the US, we have an overabundance of food options, most of which are not real. Don't worry, I won't get on my soapbox with that. But the point is, our abundance of options causes us to arbitrarily eat or stress eat or emotionally eat, right? We're eating in times when we're not hungry at all. So taking the walk is a great way for you to hold yourself accountable and actually go over why. Like, okay, why do I have an urge for this? Like, why is this even a thing? And then the last point in part one, before I transition to part two, this last point in part one, this is what the nutritionist teaches his clients. Be okay with being hungry. Get comfy with being uncomfy. Get comfy with being uncomfy. Now I know you've heard that before, right? Get comfortable being uncomfortable. You're used to that, right? But in this video, you're gonna hear why that's important. You're gonna hear the science of why that's important. So now we're gonna get into number two. Number one, make the distraction difficult. Do practical physical things to make the distraction difficult. And just remember that when it comes to the short-term gratification, you will notice a big uptick in discomfort right before you give in to the temptation because of the dopamine release that your body is anticipating after you do it. Okay. And here's something that just occurred to me. Jay Shetty actually pointed something out in an interview back in 2023 or 2022, but he actually pointed out in terms of gratification, the short-term gratification, you'll feel a dopamine release leading up to it. You'll feel the dopamine release before you do it and after you do it. But he says for the things that really matter, you'll feel the dopamine release exclusively after you do it. For the short-term stuff, the stuff that might not be serving you, the things that are distractive, you'll feel the dopamine release beforehand as part of your anticipation to do it. For the stuff that's meaningful, the stuff that will move the needle, you'll feel the massive dopamine release after you do it, exclusively after you do it. So there's a lot of neurochemical stuff going on before you give in to the distraction. So get comfortable being uncomfortable. And this leads into number two, which is treating your luxury item like the love of your life. Pursue your luxury item like it's the love of your life. If you're in a relationship, you understand what that means. You understand the process of pursuit. It took a minute for you to get into that long-term relationship, right? It took a few dates. You had to get to know the person. And if the chemistry was really there, you likely became a bit obsessive. Not in any unhealthy way necessarily, but the person was on your mind a lot. You wanted to be around the person as often as possible. You wanted to be on the phone with the person as often as possible and for as long as possible, right? There's a slight level of obsession when it comes to infatuation. That's what's necessary for your luxury item too. Not only do you have to make the distraction difficult, You have to usher in a season of obsession for your luxury item. Here's why. When it comes to success, one of the things you'll always hear from some of the most successful people is they use words like vision or visualization. Here's the science behind it. That is the truth. Having vision and visualizing your outcomes are necessary. Here's the science behind it now. Again, shout out to Cal Newport. So there are two sections of your brain that work closely together when it comes to working towards your luxury item, moving the needle towards your luxury item. Your prefrontal cortex, which has to do with logic and attaining information, and your hippocampus, which is the part of your brain that controls your memory. You have to create memories that pertain to your luxury item. You have to obsess over it, learn what you need to learn about it, do the reps necessary so you can create those memories for yourself, but also visualize. That way, those two parts of your brain will continually work together, because what your prefrontal cortex is going to do with its logic, right? You bring in the new information, you memorize the information, but now those two are going to process, and based on your memories, the logic part of your brain is going to say, okay, now is this feasible? Based on the memories we now have, based on our reps, based on what we know about this thing, can we do this? 9 times out of 10, the answer is going to be yes. Most things are attainable. Most things are possible. Yes, we have to factor in capacity, right? You have to be honest about that, right? But those two parts of the brain are constantly working together as it relates to processing. So not only are you researching the information and getting your reps in so you can experience it for yourself, you have to put yourself in the experience. But the other thing, and you'll hear all your favorite people say this too that are mega successful, is studying people that have already succeeded at the thing that you want to do, whatever that luxury item is. It can be rebuilding a car, refurbishing an old car. It can be, I always use a book example, right? It could be writing your first book. It can be creating your own podcast. Whatever that luxury item is that you're still sitting on, research the people that have done it already. There's science behind this. We are wired as human beings to study the most successful people. This goes all the way back. We have a tendency, especially back when we were tribal, we as human beings have the tendency to study the most fit and most successful people within our tribe, whatever that is. In modern day parlance, that would be whatever niche you're in or trying to be in or trying to enter into, and mimic the behaviors of those most successful and fit people to ensure our survival. Because if we didn't mimic those behaviors, we were going to die. Like we were going to be left behind and eaten by a predator or something. You know what I mean? So this goes way back. This is deep-seated stuff. So those are the two things, or three if you want to count it as three. Learn as much information as possible about your luxury item, whatever that is. Learn as much information as possible. Create new memories by doing the reps. And of course, studying the most successful. Like study all the success stories that you can about your luxury item. What does a successful person look like that has done the thing, that has completed the thing that you want to do? And number 4, when you're doing your visualizations, this is the thing that some people get wrong. I learned this from Tony Robbins. He calls them incantations. Instead of affirmations, he calls them incantations, which is incorporating emotion into your visualizations. It's not enough to simply picture yourself achieving the thing. You have to fully embody it. You have to fully feel the experience. So not only do you have memories, because now you've done some reps, you've researched all the information, and based on your information, you can properly inform your visualization. But then make yourself feel what that success is going to feel like based on what you've researched the successful people do. The people that have written their first book, the people who successfully restored the car, your favorite classic car, you know what I mean? The people who have successfully launched their podcasts, breaking through all of the imposter syndrome and just getting it done, doing it anyway, right? Fully embody what that's going to feel like. And in my coaching, I walk people through this. I say, where are you when it happens? Who, if anyone, are you with when it happens? What are you wearing? What is your environment looking like? What are the smells of your environment when you accomplish the thing? Are you on the phone? Do you share this victory with anybody? Do you share the victory with people around you? Are you on the phone with somebody when you accomplish it? Do you see the accomplishment on your phone? Maybe you're checking, maybe it's a financial goal and you see it as an account balance. You're checking your bank account balance. Maybe it's something like that. But in your visualization, fully embody the experience. Add the emotions to it because the emotions are going to be the glue that brings you closer to that thing you want to do, to the person you want to be. So, number one, make the distraction difficult, like physically, practically make the distraction difficult. Distance yourself from the thing or go for a walk or quiet the device. And then one bonus thing that I'll add as it relates to number one, shout out to Mignon Francois for this. She shared this with us in the UOU Mastermind earlier in July. What she said was compartmentalize your devices. So set up your devices for different purposes. That way you're not a slave to any of them. So in her example, she said, only use your phone for what it's meant for. So if you're doing quick social media posts, reels, Instagram reels or Facebook stories or whatever, quick TikToks, whatever, sure, use it for that. Text messages, obviously, phone calls, obviously. And then for your streaming, if you really do want to carve out that time to binge, use your bigger screen. Don't use your phone for that. If you have a laptop, use your laptop. If you have your TV, only exclusively do it on your TV. If you have a tablet, do it on your tablet. But the point is, don't do everything on one device because then all of the distractions are going to cascade the minute you touch the device. So compartmentalize your device use. So that's another way to make the distractions difficult. That way you limit your access to whichever relevant device you need to stay away from. So make the distractions more difficult. And then number two, make your luxury item the love of your life. Pursue your luxury item like it's the love of your life. Obsess over it. Get as much information about it as possible. Once you get as much information as possible, or maybe at the same time, do the work, do the reps, whatever is necessary to get you steps and steps closer to the goal. Like physically get involved with that, do the reps, because that builds new memories. You're receiving new data, and with the reps, you're building new memories. Remember, these two sections of your brain are going to constantly communicate with each other. And then, of course, study the successful examples of completion for whatever your luxury item is. Study those successful examples and mimic those behaviors. Any successful person you talk to, they're going to tell you the same thing. ET tells us that all the time in the UOU Mastermind. Shout out to ET, the hip hop preacher. He said, study people who have done it already, people who are successful, and copy their behaviors. Tony Robbins teaches it. What he says is copy their patterns. And he breaks it into three. Like one of them is their physique, the other is their mindset, I want to say, and the other is like their spiritual beliefs, I want to say. But look it up. Go Google that. I might have butchered it, but Study the successful people and mimic their behaviors, though, to get you to that success. Because they might have gone through some trial and error and can share with you some mistakes that you don't have to make. That's the beauty of books. That's the beauty of nonfiction books. These folks have gone through their experiences and they collapse time for you by putting all of their experiences in a book, which you can technically knock out in a week if you really want to, especially if you go the audiobook route. You can really knock out an audiobook quick. Or if you use services like Blinkist, which offer you book summaries if you don't have time to read a whole book or listen to a whole audiobook. Services like Blinkist can give you the Cliff's Notes. Remember Cliff Notes? The Cliff Notes version of what's in the book, the most important pieces of the content, the lessons you want to take away. So yeah, copy what works. Pursue the thing like it's the love of your life. And when you're visualizing, fully embody it. Jamal King talks about this a lot, the 9-to-5 millionaire. When he talks about vision, yes, that's his spiritual gift. But for any one of us that wants to do that, that's all it takes. It takes you researching the stuff, because he always talks about that. Go expose yourself. Research the information. Go put yourself in it, aka getting those reps, right? The networking events, the conferences, reading the books, whatever it takes to put yourself in that environment. Talking to the people who've done it, joining different groups, writers groups, auto enthusiast groups for my examples, right? Digital groups, whatever the case may be. Getting involved, fully embodying those experiences and creating new memories. So here's the connection now. This is the part I promised in the beginning. Why you need both. Here's the science of why you need both. So remember in part 1, I talked about the massive neurochemical response or information that you're getting right before you give in to a distraction. Because there's dopamine in anticipation of the gratification. And there's a level of discomfort right before you give in. So there's a lot. You're feeling a lot in the short term, which is why it's so appealing. When you're doing the long-term thing, when you're pursuing your luxury item and you're being obsessive and taking in new information on a more incremental basis, that gratification is much smaller and much more subtle. It's easy to miss. It's easy to ignore, which is why we have a tendency to give in to the distraction. We're not getting as much neurochemical stimulation when we're doing the pursuit part. However, remember at the end of part 1, I said, get comfy being uncomfy. The nutritionist told his clients, like, get used to feeling hungry for a little bit. It's okay. You're not going to die. You know you're not going to starve. You know eventually you're going to eat. So just be okay with being uncomfortable. Be okay with, feeling a little bit of a grind in your stomach. It's fine. Like, let the feeling will eventually pass. And here's why. This is where the two marry now. And this is why you need both approaches to beating procrastination. When you're in a space of being comfortable with being uncomfortable, you're more sensitive to sensing the smaller bits of gratification and motivation that come in the pursuit of your luxury item. Be honest. Be totally honest. Keep it a buck, because I'm speaking from experience too. When we're pursuing the distraction, we fall almost into a daze or a stupor when it comes to that. When we're constantly succumbing to the distraction, whether that's binging, whether it's eating, whatever the case may be, gaming, sleeping, whatever the distraction is, if you notice, you tend to fall into a stupor with that. You tend to fall into an autopilot when it comes to the distraction. You're easily drawn away and enticed, as the Bible says. You're easily drawn away. However, if you're in a constant state of being uncomfortable, you're much more self aware and much more sensitive to what's going on. So you're much more self aware and much more situationally aware, which means when you're doing the needle moving activities, you're far more keen to that gratification when you're moving the needle, that more subtle motivation that comes with that. And that subtle motivation is uncomfortable. When you're doing the stuff that moves the needle, it might be minutia. It might feel like minutia at first, especially if it's something you're new at. By the way, let me tell y'all something right now. I'll put the link in my description right now. But to my great friend Lisa A. Smith, the whole food plant-based health coach, she recently did an episode on how to be new at anything. Y'all need to watch that. Like, as simplistic as that might sound, you're like, wait, really? Y'all had to talk about being new at something? No, it's an incredible mindset shift. It's eye-opening. And, we all tend to be very difficult with ourselves when we're new at something. There's a level of patience that's required when you're new at something, a level of patience with yourself and a level of patience in getting to mastery. Because remember with my interview with Coach Ben Bakayoko, like, consistent takes 3 to 4 months alone. Mastery can take up to 10 or 20 years. It takes as long as it takes. It takes as long as it takes. So sometimes those smaller, more subtle, more ignorable bits of motivation and gratification, they're uncomfortable. So you have to get used to that discomfort. So distance the distractions. And yes, embrace the discomfort. Any coach is going to tell you that. Every coach you deal with is going to tell you that. Embrace the discomfort. I want to say this was Tom Bilyeu that said it. Embrace the suck. I want to say that was Tom that said it. But yeah, embrace the suck. Like, get comfy being uncomfy. And then moving into your needle moving stuff, pursue your luxury item like it's the love of your life. Pursue it. Obsess over it. Research what works, do the reps, and learn as much as you need to learn about it. Because once you're comfortable with being uncomfortable, now that you're denying yourself from the distraction, you're going to get uncomfortable. Your body's going to go through withdrawal. But once you're uncomfortable and you're accustomed to being uncomfortable, you're going to be more self-aware and situationally aware to sense the smaller bits of gratification. And you'll develop the habit of contentment as you progress towards your luxury item. So you have to do both. Both are needed. That was probably a whole lot. If you have any questions, by all means, shoot me the question in the comments. I'll be sure to answer it. Or, DM me on Instagram. You can follow me there at Getting the Win Show. You can also follow me on Pinterest and Threads at Getting the Win Show. And as a reminder, subscribe on YouTube at Getting the Win. But thank you so much for tuning in. Hopefully this episode was helpful to you. I'll put the link in the description as well for Cal Newport's podcast episode where he talked about this exact subject. That way you can check it out. Just a warning though, Cal Newport gets heavy into science. So if you're somebody that's not detail oriented, that's not your personality style, you may not want to watch that because he gets into it, y'all. Like, he gets deep into the weeds with the science. So it might start your eyes might glaze over a little bit if that's not your personality type. But I want to provide the link just so you know where what I'm sharing with you is coming from. None of this is cap. Science and personal experience. So yeah, thank you for tuning in. As always, be sure to hashtag get on that. Stay on your luxury item. Pursue it like it's the love of your life. Obsess over it. Make it your long-term relationship. Of course, don't forsake your actual relationship if you're in one, right? But I'm just saying your luxury item is a luxury. Hold it in that high regard. Okay. And yeah, if you have any questions for me, hit me up. If you want to get into the Goal Getter community, just shoot me an email at info@melissathomas.co with Telegram in the subject line, and I'll get you in there. And again, have a great and productive rest of your Wednesday and a great and productive rest of your week. Peace. Beat procrastination with an attitude. Go to gettingthewingear.com. We've got shirts that deliver that message of your strong focus and dedication to your hashtag luxury item, because your goal is super important. You are super important, and it's important that the world knows that you know that. Give them the message of focus, of self-work, of self-improvement, and empowerment. Go to gettingthewingear.com. Check out the shirts, sweats, mugs, bags if you need it, and give yourself that reminder, give the world that reminder that you are indeed a goal getter. You are indeed a winner.